Let's move on to some more serious stuff, shall we? Because I've got a bone to pick with one Mark Cuban, who threw Jalen Brunson's father straight under the bus, went forward, just beep, 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 backed over him again, forward one more time, beep, 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 backed over him again. That's basically what he did with Jalen Brunson's father. And really, it's a deferral of the blame from where it really should be, which is on his shoulders, but I'm getting ahead of myself. If you didn't know, give you a little context on the situation. Jalen Brunson played for the Mavs his first 4 years in the league. More prominently last year, he was a critical player on the Mavs playoff run that they had. I think they went all the way to the conference finals last year, and that was due in large part to Jalen Brunson really, holding down the fort, being a critical guy when it comes to just doing the stuff that Luka Doncic doesn't, playing a bit more of a traditional point guard role, filling in the gaps as far as the defense is concerned, really just being a solid player all around. A guy that I said going out of last season after they were eliminated from the playoffs, that's a guy you needed to keep around, absolutely needed to keep around in Dallas when it was all said and done. They were deep in negotiations to keep Jalen Brunson in Dallas last offseason, but ultimately, negotiations fell through, though, and Brunson signed with the Knicks. That's the top level of the story. That's, probably could have just stayed there. I think it probably would have served everyone better if we just, it stayed there. It is what it is. Things happen, and we all move our separate ways, live happily ever after. But in a weird pregame media scrum last week, Mark Cuban placed the blame squarely on Brunson's father, Rick, by saying things went south when parents got involved. And while I totally think this is probably the case, I think Rick Brunson probably came in and said, hey, my son's not signing that deal. You're going to have to up the money, or you're going to have to, go look somewhere else. On the surface level, I think that's probably true. I've got issues with the way Cuban framed this thing. I mean, first and foremost, look at what the deal was that Jalen Brunson ended up getting. It was a 4-year, $104 million contract with the Knicks last offseason. And if you're thinking in NFL terms, obviously fully guaranteed contract, all that stuff. I mean, good for him. That seems like a good deal right there, right? I mean, that might sound like a lot, but consider how large NBA contracts are nowadays. I mean, you're getting $150 million thrown around like it's nothing pretty much. And just think about how incredibly valuable Jalen Brunson was to the Mavs that last season. I mean, he was a main reason. I mean, there is a big reason. They added Christian Wood in the offseason, did the Mavs. They lost Jalen Brunson. They added Kyrie Irving through the middle of the season, and they still ended up missing even the play-in game. I mean, they were the 11th seed when it was all said and done, basically on the strength of Jalen Brunson leaving town. That is how valuable he ended up being for the success of that team. That $104 million should have been an easy number to eclipse when it was all said and done. If Cuban truly wanted to make this deal happen, he would have forked over the $120 million and just kept this thing moving, but he didn't. He ended up lowballing. He ended up playing around, tried to get one over on Jalen Brunson, like owners have done over and over again. Tried to, pinch a penny here and there, and it backfired. Backfired in a big way. That's on Mark Cuban for not pulling the trigger when it's all said and done. He framed it the way it was Rick Brunson's fault. I'd say it's more Mark Cuban's fault for not forking over the money that Jalen Brunson rightly deserved, and he's having a career year this year for somebody else because he decided to, pinch your pennies where you could when it was all said and done. And secondly, on top of that, on top of the size contract that Jalen Brunson ended up signing, building off that last point, Rick Brunson was trying to protect his son from signing a bad deal. There's no way he should be getting villainized for that, because I would imagine $104 million is a little bit more than what the Dallas Mavericks were offering. And Jalen Brunson was worth more than $104 million. I mean, flat out. The Knicks signed a pretty solid team-friendly deal with that one because the Dallas Mavericks simply did not want to do it. And Rick Brunson, he played professionally for a long time. He obviously saw what was happening as it unfolded. So he stepped in to serve the best interest of his kid, which is something I'm sure every single parent would do if they were in that situation and they understood what was happening as it was happening. The only villain in this whole situation, as far as I'm concerned, is Mark Cuban. It's not Rick Brunson. It's not Jalen Brunson. It's Mark Cuban, and maybe a little bit Luka Doncic, but that's different reasons. He's just a big old baby when it comes to crying to the media about the officials and all that stuff. But different subject for a different day. We'll get back to the Mark Cuban of it all. Just go look back in history of what Mark Cuban has done as the Mavs owner. He got lucky when the team stumbled their way into a championship in that first season with LeBron down with the Heat. Wasn't quite sure what the chemistry of the team was in that season. So, you know what? You got him at the right time. You know what? You made a good run through the Western Conference. You stumbled your way into a championship win. You got at least one for Dirk Nowitzki. So pat on the back. That's good for you. Good for you, Mark Cuban. But I'll tell you what, outside of that, they did not even sniff a title after that. I'm not even sure they went to a conference finals. And if they did, they got waxed by basically anyone they played in the conference finals from then going forward. And you know what? I think Dirk Nowitzki won a title in like the midst of his prime, still had a couple years left in his prime, and then they just squandered away every last bit of his prime after that. I mean, just finished with the one championship, which good for him for winning one. But if Mark Cuban would have built a team around him, there's no reason they couldn't have won one or two more even on top of that. And really, the Mavs under Mark Cuban and their MO under Mark Cuban has been to luck their way into getting a easy for me to say once again, a transcendent international prospect and put zero help around that player. I mean, the guy, I think the second best player on that championship team with Dirk Nowitzki was like either Jason Terry or Shawn Marion, which, hey, if you know those guys, you're definitely NBA fans, and I applaud you for doing so. But if you know those guys as well, you know those should not be the second best players on a championship roster. I mean, not by a long shot when it's all said and done. And that falls squarely on Mark Cuban, on the GM, whoever the hell the GM was back then. But it's just one of those things where they were doing it with Dirk Nowitzki. Now they're doing it with Luka Doncic. I mean, Christian Wood's an okay player. Kyrie Irving was an all right player. But those are guys that don't really fit with what Luka Doncic does. And meanwhile, Mark Cuban can use the draw of those international phenoms to market his team abroad, make even more and more money than what he was making before, while also not really improving the team at all with any moves that he's made throughout the course of an offseason. And when the Mavs have brought in talented players like Wood, like Kyrie Irving, they clearly do not fit with what Luka Doncic does on the court, like I just said there. I mean, it is just, you're just throwing talent at the wall, seeing what sticks, making it look like you're trying your best to win, but ultimately you're pinching pennies where it counts, and you're not spending the money that you should when you really need to. And don't even get me started on all the crybaby bullshit that the Mavs have done, engaged in constantly complaining about the efficiency or the officiating and going as far as to contest the outcome of games. That was the biggest horseshit thing that I've probably seen in a professional sports. I mean, just a weak move. Biggest crybaby move that I've seen in professional sports for quite some time. The Mavs contesting that game, I think it was on March 2nd, because, they missed a call and we lost the game. Oh my God, we can't. We have to contest the result. Cry me a fucking river, man. Everyone has bad officiating at some time. Everyone's got a problem with officiating. No one comes out there and contests games, because you know why? You look like a goddamn baby when you do that sort of thing. So I don't really respect the Mavs as an organization for doing that sort of stuff. And for my money, the Mavs are probably the most annoying, insufferable team in the entirety of American professional sports. And guess what? The fish rots from the head being Mark Cuban. So Mark Cuban can lay blame and take petty shots at whoever he wants, but fact of the matter is, he's a bad team builder and a bad culture setter, and ultimately, he's reaping what he's sown. Thankfully, his poorly constructed team couldn't even get into the play-in tournament, finished with an 11 seed, so I don't have to think about them for a good long while after this headline, which is good for my blood pressure, because I have grown to absolutely hate that team and everything they stand for. And with that, I'm done with the Mavericks for now. I'm done with Mark Cuban. I've said my piece.